There are quite a few notable attractions at the Disneyland Resort that have failed. We've talked about the disastrous rocket rods and Superstar Limo, but there's another more recent attraction that stands out as perhaps the worst ride ever built at the resort. A ride so clearly flawed that it closed in under 3 years. Let's take a look at the disastrous Luigi's Flying Tires right here on Theme Park Crazy. Quick note before we get started, you could check out a new video right now on my Patreon. This video discusses a forgotten Chinese theme park that may very well shock you. It's got a spinning Jesus coaster and the most questionable urinals ever made. See it weeks before its YouTube debut at the link in the description. Also, I'll be holding a live Q&A session on August 31st exclusively for my patrons. Back on today's video, we've got a real doozy to talk about. Believe it or not, this ride's history dates all the way back to the early days of Disneyland. Among the park's opening day areas was a science fiction themed zone named Tomorrowland. Here, guests could check out a number of attractions based on the curiosity of new technology and global developments. Guests could take a rocket to the moon, explore the concept of highway travel on Autopia, and gaze upon a golden toilet in the bathroom of tomorrow. Over the years, the park would add several new state-of-the-art attractions to catch the attention of the public, and Walt Disney himself aimed to keep the park fresh with regular updates. Around the late 1950s, Walt expressed the desire for a bumper boat-style attraction to replace the failed Phantom Boats ride. For those unaware, bumper boats are pretty much bumper cars on the water, and they still operate at countless amusement parks today. For amusement park lovers, including myself, this ride is considered to be a fun and nostalgic experience, as nostalgic as eating a sweet bowl of cereal on a Saturday morning. And speaking of which, have you ever had a hard time finding a good tasting cereal that has high quality ingredients as an adult? I agree that can be pretty hard, especially when I'm trying to reduce my sugar intake. Fortunately, this video's sponsor Magic Spoon has the perfect solution. Magic Spoon is a cereal that seems almost too good to be true, but it is true, and you can get a delicious cereal with more protein and less sugar. Magic Spoon has 12 to 14 grams of protein, as well as 4 to 5 grams of net carbs and 0 grams of sugar in each serving, so you can feel good about what you're eating. And here are just some of the amazing flavors you could get. Nutty peanut butter, sweet maple waffle, rich cocoa, funtastic fruity, nostalgic birthday cake, and delicious cinnamon roll. And I have to say, my favorite flavor has to be maple waffle right here. It really brings me back to those good old days as a kid, on the couch watching cartoons, enjoying cereal. All of those nostalgic tastes you remember with much more wholesome ingredients. And Magic Spoon offers more than just cereal. You can get these scrumptious cereal treats as well. There's fan favorites marshmallow and chocolate peanut butter, and 2 new flavors, blueberry muffin and double chocolate. These bars have 11 to 12 grams of protein, 1 gram of sugar, and 1 to 2 grams of net carbs, so you can always get the fuel you need on the go. Head to the link in the description or use my promo code CRAZY and you'll get $5 off your order of Magic Spoon cereal or Magic Spoon treats, or you could find it at your nearest grocery store. Magic Spoon is so confident that you'll love their product that it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee, so if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money with no questions asked. So if you're looking for a blast to the past with high quality ingredients, head to my link in the description and pick up a box of Magic Spoon today. Back at Disneyland, Imagineers, including the legendary Bob Gurr, sought to expand upon the idea of a bumper boat style attraction and figure out a way to fit it into Disneyland's lineup. Initially, this attraction, named Duck Bumps, was pretty much a run-of-the-mill bumper boats ride, except it had what appeared to be disembodied duck heads on sticks. You see, this is what happens when you owe Scrooge McDuck money. The idea seemed fun, but a newer, more high-tech take on the concept soon took over. Around this time, interest was building for a new vehicle type known as the hovercraft. These non-wheeled vehicles used air blowers to seemingly levitate off the ground. Depending on the exact model, they could be used over land and water. Bob Gurr was quoted as saying, "In those days, everybody had a hovercraft project." After Imagineers drifted towards this idea, a German salesman presented them with a prototype for a one-person hovercraft. This model was powered by a propeller, and while it was a cool concept, Gurr determined that the spinning blades were too dangerous for a theme park ride. Still, Imagineers wanted to make this ride happen, so they quickly brainstormed ways to make the vehicles levitate without propellers. To do so, they sought help from American amusement manufacturer Aero Development. Having collaborated with Disney in the past, Aero sought to look into this concept and flesh it out. At Aero's testing facility, a prototype was manufactured, and Walt Disney himself actually took a ride on it. After a lengthy development process, Disney would patent a new hovercraft attraction with an extremely unique levitation system. Instead of blower motors on the vehicles, the motors would be hooked up to a chamber underneath the ride's floor. Attached to the floor were several air valves that were designed to release air when the vehicles passed over them. These valves were hooked up to a computer system which would control the airflow needed to levitate the vehicles. At Aero's facility, the system was said to work flawlessly, and soon enough, a large-scale version was planned for Disneyland. This ride, known as the Flying Saucers, eventually opened to the public in 1961. Debuting as part of Tomorrowland, this ride instantly caught the attention and curiosity of the public. After boarding, passengers were met with a bumper boat style attraction where the goal was to bump into other guests. To steer, passengers shifted their weight in the direction they wished to travel. It seemed easy enough, but unfortunately, not all guests could get the hang of it. As it turned out, only guests of a moderate or average weight could ride as intended. Small children who were single riders were too light for the vehicles and ended up being constantly bounced around by the airflow. On the other hand, guests of a larger size would move extremely slowly, and sometimes they would just awkwardly be sitting still during the ride's circuit. Weight restrictions aside, this ride was faced with other major problems. Computer-based ride technology at the time was still in its infancy. As a result, the computers on the Flying Saucers were ill-equipped to handle the air control valves. Bob Gurr later said that if they had waited 15 to 20 years, they would have had the computer technology more suited for the task. Another common issue was caused by small children bouncing their vehicles up and down. This created shockwaves inside the chamber below, which sometimes caused all of the valves to open at once. This caused the ride to suddenly stop, and the system would take hours to reset. That all said, this ride was still popular among guests, and many enjoyed it when it did work. Unfortunately, its popularity didn't change the fact that the ride was difficult to maintain and expensive to operate. Plus, with just 1 or 2 guests per vehicle, it was much lower capacity than the park's other attractions, making it a lot less profitable. So when Disneyland revamped Tomorrowland 5 years after the Flying Saucers opened, it was decided not to bring the ride back. Guests who enjoyed the ride greatly missed it, and some were royally pissed off about it. It may have been expensive to operate and technically unreliable, but people still remembered it as a fun little ride. It was even featured as an available attraction in the game Roller Coaster Tycoon decades later. Over the next few decades, Disneyland officials regularly had people coming up to them, asking things like, "When are you guys gonna bring back the Flying Saucers?" Despite this feedback though, Disney showed no interest in returning to a ride concept that didn't work out for them. Or did they? Fast forward to the year 2010 and the Disneyland Resort had a new park, Disney's California Adventure. First opening in 2001, this park was initially lambasted as underbudgeted, tacky, and dull. In its first few years, its attendance numbers were stagnant, and it failed to generate the same interest that Disneyland did. Towards the end of the 2000s, though, several plans sought to renew interest in the park as part of a massive 5-year redevelopment plan. These included the new Toy Story Midway Mania ride in 2008, the World of Color Nighttime Show in 2010, the Little Mermaid Dark Ride in 2011, and finally, the all-new Cars Land in 2012. Based on the Cars franchise, this new land was themed to the quirky town of Radiator Springs. Its star attraction Radiator Springs Racers pitted passengers against each other in a high-speed race. This ride continues to operate today as a highly acclaimed attraction, but what you may not remember is that there was another much less popular ride that opened in this land. One of the Cars franchise's many side characters is an Italian 1959 Fiat 500 named Luigi. In the movies, he runs a tire store called Casa della Tires. At some point in the design process for Cars Land, it was decided that this would be a perfect opportunity to reimagine the old Flying Saucers ride. Cars franchise creator and former Pixar chief creative officer John Lasseter came up with the idea as a longtime fan of Disneyland. Eventually, the concept of the ride was tied into Luigi's tire shop, and instead of futuristic hovercrafts, the vehicles would resemble giant tires. This ride, named Luigi's Flying Tires, was scheduled to open with the new land in the spring of 2012. Construction was swift and on schedule, with Imagineers rigorously testing the finished attraction before its opening. John Lasseter publicly praised the ride, hyping it up as awesome and exciting, and saying he looked forward to seeing the reactions of riders. Well, it wouldn't be long before initial reactions came in, and they weren't exactly what he was hoping them to be. In March of 2012, Disney CEO Bob Iger got the chance to test ride the attraction, and this is where just one of the ride's biggest problems became obvious. Iger was said to be hugely unimpressed with the ride, and immediately requested Imagineers to make it faster. Imagineers, no doubt mortified at this point, had to tell Iger that the ride was going as fast as it could. As if that weren't bad enough, it was discovered that a planned joystick spin control system was clunky and difficult to operate, so this feature had to be removed. Imagineers were likely in a state of absolute panic at this point, and they had just 90 days to try to make the ride more exciting. The solution? Giant beach balls. Yes, upon the ride's eventual opening in June of 2012, there were giant Italian flag-colored beach balls scattered around the course and given to passengers. This was inspired by early promotional footage of the Flying Saucers, which saw guests playing with smaller beach balls while on the ride. Thousands of giant custom beach balls were ordered for the attraction, and according to MiceChat.com, ride operators were staffed backstage every day blowing up new beach balls with air nozzles to keep the fleet of balls clean and freshly plumped. Honestly, this ride would have succeeded a lot more if its tagline was, "We've got the biggest balls of them all." In addition, a soundtrack of Italian-sounding music played during the ride circuit to add more excitement to the slow attraction. Unfortunately, neither of these additions did much to improve the ride. Although Cars Land as a whole was a massive success for the park, Luigi's Flying Tires was commonly ranked poorly in guest surveys. Brady McDonald of the Los Angeles Times heavily criticized the ride, saying it was slow and hard to control. He added that the park's additions didn't make it more worth riding, saying, quote, "I'm not willing to wait an hour to play hovercraft dodgeball to Italian music. But you gotta admit that on paper, that sounds like one of the coolest things ever." In general, the ride was said to have a high learning curve. Though some local regular guests managed to have fun, most tourists and families just couldn't figure out how to move correctly. Despite instructions being posted along the queue, the difficulty for first-time riders left a bad taste. As Bob Gurr put it, guests today are constantly looking at their smartphones and don't really pay attention to ride instructions in line. So building an attraction that requires guests to suddenly learn how to ride it correctly is inevitably going to lead to awkwardness and disappointment. One other thing worth noting was the air pressure. Bob Gurr also brought up how Imagineers decided to save money by not including valves in the floor. This meant that there would be a 100% air loss throughout the ride, making it harder to build enough pressure to lift the vehicles. In response to the slowness criticism, Imagineers came up with a last-ditch effort to make the ride faster. Surprisingly, while the aforementioned spin-controlled joystick system was disabled for the ride's opening, the system's infrastructure was not removed. Park officials announced plans to remove the infrastructure to increase the speed, but since it was only about 20 pounds, it wasn't going to make much of a difference. The main problem, which couldn't be solved at this point, was the overall bulkiness of the vehicles compared to the old Flying Saucers. In order to solve its predecessor's capacity issues, the Flying Tires were made bigger and able to hold 2 people no matter what size. Parents could ride with their children on the old ride, but these new vehicles could hold 2 adults. Imagineers greatly underestimated how bigger vehicles would affect the ride, and they contributed to how slow it was. The bulkiness of the vehicles also made them easy to trip over while getting on or off. So much so that skin knees and twisted ankles were said to be a regular occurrence according to the Los Angeles Times. And speaking of people getting hurt, this is why the beach balls were removed soon after the ride opened. According to the park's vice president Mary Niven, people would often slow down to pick up the beach balls before boarding, extending the wait times. Even worse, there were said to be a few minor incidents where people got hurt after getting hit with the giant balls. In fact, the California Department of Industrial Relations had to investigate a report that a passenger suffered neck and back pain after getting hit in the face with a beach ball. To avoid future lawsuits, the ride's balls were removed. This decision was actually met with criticism, as some considered the beach balls to be the only fun thing about the ride. All in all, reference intended, this attraction was reduced to a dull wannabe bumper car ride that most guests had little interest in checking out. Though it was more reliable than the flying saucers, it was nowhere near as fun. At least rides like the infamous Superstar Limo were memorably bad enough to laugh at in hindsight. But sometimes, being boring is worse than being flat out bad. At least this was according to most guests. Some have actually said that this ride was fun, and that if you knew how to ride it correctly, you could have a good time on it. Still, most agreed that this ride was a flop, and after less than 3 years of operation, it was announced that the ride would close in February of 2015. On Disney's blog, the company wrote, "Luigi's Flying Tires will close as our favorite Fiat departs for a vacation in his home country of Italy to visit with family." Indeed, Luigi wouldn't be gone for long, because the same day the ride's closure was announced, a replacement was already revealed. This new ride, named Luigi's Rollickin' Roadsters, would make its debut the next year on March 7th, 2016. This new ride saw guests boarding Luigi's cousins and engaging in a dance festival. Through the use of a trackless system, the cars spin independently and maneuver around each other. It's a fun, charming, and overall cute ride, and many consider it to be a huge step up from the flying tires. To this day, Cars Land continues to operate as one of the highlights of the Disneyland Resort. Whether you love or hate the Cars movies, it's definitely worth checking out. But as for the flying tires, their failure has since been forgotten, and perhaps that's for the best. Now it's time for the comment shoutout program. This is where I take 5 random comments from my previous video and read them out. These comments come from my video on the top 20 worst roller coasters ever made. Drunk Astronomy says, "This carnival company that came through my town every summer actually had one of the Swiss toboggans. I always went on it because it's not like you get many roller coasters with a traveling carnival. And yeah, they were able to be moved. I think that was their selling trait." Ron Adams 9062 says, "I rode Vortex the year it opened. It wasn't rough and was actually quite fun for the time. Take that with a large grain of salt though, as the only other stand-up coaster I had ridden to compare it to was Shockwave at King's Dominion." Mike Kelly 7707 says, "Infusion at Blackpool Pleasure Beach is renowned for being one of the roughest in the UK. One ride for the credit, then a never again ride." V Jalila 96 says, "I would add Neo's Twister at Power Park Finland. It's Wild Mouse coaster and very painful one." And Chill Guy 99 says, "I'm an enthusiast who loves aerodynamics. They are one of my favorite coaster manufacturers, and I'm used to every worst coaster list being full of aero rides. This is the first list I have ever seen that didn't go in that direction. Only Ninja popped up, which makes me believe that more enthusiasts are beginning to appreciate, or at least forgive, the unique fun that can be had on some classic old steel coasters. This is a rare list where I understood and agreed with most of the choices." If you want to see your words in my next video, leave a comment down below and it may be selected. Please note though that inflammatory or spam comments will not be read. Also, special thanks to my newest Patreon members, Christy Tutt, Grizzly Wisley, Jeff Green, Patrick Southern, and Zach Horgan. Thank you all so much, and if you want to support me on Patreon, you can do so once again at the link in the description. Thanks for watching, everyone. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on social media on Instagram and Facebook, or you can check out my website at themeparkcrazy.com. And I'm on TikTok. This is Theme Park Crazy, and I'll see you all next time.